Marranos is a term used for those Jews living in Iberia who converted or were forced to convert to Christianity yet continued to practice Judaism in secret. The term specifically refers to the accusation of crypto-Judaism, whereas the term converso was used for the wider population of Jewish converts to Catholicism whether or not they secretly still practiced Jewish rites. The term Marrano came into later use in 1492 with the Castilian Alhambra decree, which outlawed the practice of Judaism in Spain and required all remaining Jews to convert or leave. From then on the secret practice of Judaism along conversos in Spain was known as Marranism. The wider term for converts from Judaism was Cristianos Nuevos Cristos Novos meaning new Christians, referring to both converts from Islam and Judaism, or conversos, referring specifically to converts from Judaism. Conversos numbered hundreds of thousands in Spain following the 1492 and remained under the watchful eye of the Spanish Inquisition. In Hebrew the terms Einus enforced ones and Zerah Yisrael seed of the people of Israel are sometimes used. The first Jesuits were crypto-Jews. Ignatius Loyola himself was a crypto-Jew of the occult Kabbalah. A crypto-Jew is a Jew who converts to another religion and outwardly embraces the new religion, while secretly maintaining Jewish practices. As John Terrell explains, in 1491 San Ignacio de Loyola was born in the Basque province of Guipuzcoa, Spain. His parents were Marranos and at the time of his birth the family was very wealthy. As a young man he became a member of the Jewish Illuminati order in Spain. As a cover for his crypto-Jewish activities, he became very active as a Roman Catholic. On May 20, 1521 Ignatius, as he was now called, was wounded in a battle, and became a semi-cripple. Unable to succeed in the military and political arena, he started a quest for holiness and eventually ended up in Paris where he studied for the priesthood. In 1539 he had moved to Rome where he founded the Jesuit order, which was to become the most vile, bloody and persecuting order in the Roman Catholic Church. In 1540, the current Pope Paul III approved the order. At Loyola's death in 1556 there were more than 1,000 members in the Jesuit order, located in a number of nations. Ignatius of Loyola's secretary, Paul Onco, was of Jewish descent and was the only person present at Loyola's deathbed. James Lainez, who succeeded Loyola as the second Jesuit general, was also of Jewish descent. Jews were attracted to the Jesuit order and joined in large numbers. Lainez was no exception. He was a Jew, which explains why he introduced the eschatological teaching of a return to the Jewish animal sacrifices during the millennium. In a book titled The Coming of the Messiah in Glory and Majesty published in 1812, 11 years after the death of its author, Jesuit Emmanuel de Lainez, who wrote under the fictitious pen name of a purportedly converted Jew, Rabbi I Josephat ben Ezra, in order to conceal his identity and to make his writings more palatable to the Protestant readers. He promoted the writings of 16th-century Jesuit priest Francisco Ribera, developing a futuristic perspective which restricted the prophetic fulfillments in the Book of Revelation to the end of the world. Lainez also wrote that during a millennium after the tribulation the Jewish animal sacrifices would be reinstated along with the Eucharist, the Mass, of the Catholic Church. Lainez has followed after Jewish fables and replaced the commandments of God with the commandments of men. That doctrine gives the Jews primacy in God's plan and relegates Christians to a prophetic parenthetical to be supplanted by the Jews during the 1,000-year earthly reign of Christ. Ignatius of Loyola resolved to devote himself to the conversion of non-Christians in the Holy Land. Upon his recovery, he visited the Benedictine monastery, Santa Maria de Montserrat, March 25, 1522, where he hung his military garments before an image of the Virgin. He then traveled on foot to the town of Manresa, Catalonia, and spent several months in a cave nearby, 16, where he practiced rigorous asceticism. Ignatius also began experiencing a series of visions in full daylight while in hospital. These repetitive visions appeared as a form in the air near him and this form gave him much consolation because it was exceedingly beautiful. It somehow seemed to have the shape of a serpent and had many things that shone like eyes, but were not eyes. He received much delight and consolation from gazing upon this object, but when the object vanished he became disconsolate. 17. In 1523, he instituted a pilgrimage to the Holy Land on a path of self-denial and sacrifice. He remained there from September 3 to 23 but was not permitted to stay. 12 years later, standing before the Pope with his companions, he again proposed sending his companions as emissaries to Jerusalem. Returning to Spain, he and his companions were occupied in the University of Alcalá, the present-day Complutense University of Madrid, not the newer University of Alcalá established in 1977, with the task of making disciples of women called as witnesses by the Inquisition under the direction of Magistrate Alonso Mejías. Although the Alumbrados, Illuminated, Illuminati, Enlightened Ones, of Spain were linked in their Zealand spirituality to the Franciscan reforms of which Cardinal de Cisneros was a promoter, the administrators of the Inquisition had mounting suspicions. These female disciples, Doña Leo, Doña Maria, and Doña Beatriz, were so zealous that one fell senseless, another sometimes rolled about on the ground, another had been seen in the grip of convulsions or shuddering and sweating in anguish. This suspicious activity had taken place while Ignatius and his companions were regularly preaching in public. Because of his street corner preparations being identified with the activities of the Alumbrados Illuminated or Illuminati. The Alumbrados was a term used to loosely describe practitioners of a mystical form of Christianity in Spain during the 15th–16th centuries. Some Alumbrados were only mildly heterodox, but others held views that were clearly heretical. Consequently, they were firmly repressed and became some of the early victims of the Spanish Inquisition. In 1527 Loyola was being investigated by the Catholic Church for his connections to Los Alumbrados. The Spanish Inquisition led by the Dominicans brought Loyola in for questioning him about his secret activities with Los Alumbrados. When he was brought to trial by the inquisitors, Loyola requested an audit with Pope Paul III, Alessandro Farnese, who was a member of the Farnese bloodline, an ancient Roman papal dynasty which is part of the black nobility. Loyola was granted the audit because of his influence. There he informed Alessandro Farnese that he was raising a militia to defend the papacy and supplied copies of his constitution to Farnese, which would lead to absolute control of military and politics, and absolute control of a one-world church. Loyola was completely absolved by the inquisitors with only one admonition: had it not been for his influence and his intentions which seemed to have been commissioned by Pope Paul III himself to destroy the Reformation and all opposition to the Catholic Church at the time, Loyola would have undoubtedly been tortured and forced to make a false confession as the Inquisition did with non-Catholics, Christians and suspected witches. Loyola was a real Gnostic one. After these adventurous activities, he studied at the ascetic College de Montaigu of the University of Paris, where he remained for over 7 years. In later life, he was often called Master Ignatius, due to his having obtained a master's degree from that university at the age of 43. 20. By 1534 he had gathered 6 key companions, all of whom he had met as fellow students at the University of Paris: Francis Xavier, Alfonso Salmeron, Diego Lainez, and Nicolas Bobadilla, all Spanish, Peter Faber, a Frenchman, and Simão Rodrigues of Portugal. Later, he was joined by Saint Francis Borgia, a member of the House of Borgia, who was the main aide of Emperor Charles V, and other nobles. On the morning of the 15th of August, 1534, in the chapel of Church of St. Peter, at Montmartre, Loyola and his 6 companions, of whom only one was a priest, met and took upon themselves the solemn vows of their lifelong work. Ignatius of Loyola was the main creator and first superior general of the Society of Jesus, a religious organization of the Catholic Church whose members, known as Jesuits, served the Pope as missionaries. Pope Paul III, Farnese, declared Loyola untouchable and gave him authority to carry out his own orders, which were to destroy any opposition to the Pope or the Catholic Church, instigate wars, and murder anyone who got in their way. Eventually Los Alumbrados developed into the Society of Jesus, the Army of the Vatican. When Francis Borgia, co-founder of the Jesuit order, became Jesuit general, he strengthened the substantial powers of the Jesuit generals by way of assassinations and conspiracies. The Black Pope, Jesuit general, had equal if not more power than the Pope himself and could now engage in commerce and banking, a right which had not been granted to any order but the Knight Templars hundreds of years earlier. After Los Alumbrados developed into the Jesuit order, many secret societies of Illuminati developed in other regions. In 1623 Los Alumbrados reached France and were known as Les Illumines. In northern Arabia, a group called the Roshaniya sought illumination from a supreme being who wanted a class of perfect men and women. Once the Roshaniya reached a certain degree they would achieve mystical powers, and once they had reached the 8th and final degree they were told that they had achieved perfection, very similar to the Gnostic and Babylonian doctrines of Illuminism. The Roshaniya did not disappear until the 18th century, oddly enough before the inauguration of the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati. In 1773 Pope Clement XIV suppressed the Jesuit order because the monarchs of Europe wanted to gain control of revenues and trade that the Jesuit order had control of, very similar to when the French king had the Knight Templars executed during the Inquisition when he wanted their money. and Pope Clement XIV gave in to the pressure of the European monarchs for political reasons which would later on cost him his life. A young professor of law at the Jesuit-controlled University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria, present-day Germany, named Adam Weishaupt joined the Jesuit order when the Jesuits were suppressed. By 1776 Weishaupt founded the Bavarian Illuminati modeled after the Jesuit order. Weishaupt founded the Bavarian Illuminati with the purpose of establishing a one-world government through science, technology, and economics, and developed a secret cell model where initiates of his order reported to a superior who they did not know. This perfect terrorist cell saved many Jesuits from being found and killed. Eventually Weishaupt's writings were intercepted and interpreted by the government of Bavaria and his order was banned and Weishaupt was forced to flee to Gotha under the protection of his sympathizer, Duke Ernest II. The purposes of Adam Weishaupt's Jesuit-controlled Bavarian Illuminati were to re-establish the Jesuit order's financial interests, remain secret to ensure the Vatican and the European powers could never seize the Jesuit order's financial assets, use its network and power to exact revenge on the European nobles of France, Spain, Portugal, Parma, Naples and Austria who forced the suppression of the Jesuit order, and subvert the English Masonic movement and prevent its spread of secular constitutional democracy, such as in the USA, in revenge for taking over its profitable business interests in Asia, East India Company, and finally to undertake actions to force the Pope and the Vatican to re-establish the Jesuit order and to never again force its suppression. Weishaupt's Illuminati secret cell was also used to great effect to plan the French Revolution years later, which led to the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. After the Napoleonic Wars in 1814, the monarchs who called for the suppression of the Jesuit order were no longer in power and the whole political climate in Europe changed with the Congress of Vienna, Treaty of European Powers, while Napoleon, a mere tool of the Jesuits and the Bavarian Illuminati, was in exile. Pope Pius VII issued an order to restore the Jesuit order in the Catholic countries of Europe. Yet the Jesuit order in its first general congregation made a decision to keep the Jesuit order the way it had been before the suppression of 1773, and thus the Jesuit order with the help of Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Bavarian Illuminati, restored the Jesuit order back into the good graces of the Vatican and the European monarchies.